Hello and welcome to this third Rig Rundown episode, a series of live streams that then later just become YouTube videos, talking to modular users about their setups, their music, their releases, approaches, tips and tricks, and a whole host of questions that will come from the YouTube live chat. Of course, if you're watching this later, leave a comment. Either Austin, beny, who's today's guest, or me will hopefully get back to you, but we're certainly going to answer the live chat as we go. So, Austin, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going, Ben? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really chuffed. Been enjoying your releases for some time and videos for longer as well. First of all, I really like the backdrop.
Yeah, my old studio used to be right next to a window, and now when I moved, it was just a blank wall, and I couldn't stand staring at a blank wall.
I think I first saw Bonobo with, it must have been some bespoke wallpaper or something. Just the whole wall was like this ski slope image of all Future Music or Computer Music magazine. It looked amazing.
Cool.
I don't have a great window. Well, look out my window, so I might take a leaf out of your book. But yeah, really chuffed to have you on. For those that don't know who you are or what you do, what would you kind of say? How would you present yourself, I guess?
I would say, I guess I just make, I'd call it ambient music with modular and some other gear here and there. Definitely a focus on making songs and pieces for like releases and stuff like that.
Yeah, music focused, I would say. I found you on YouTube, I think originally is where I started watching your content. Very clear that music is the kind of direction and intention, as opposed to say what I do that just make demo videos of this stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, what I wanted to ask was, and I have a separate series, people may have seen the first episode with Andrew Huang talking about getting into modular. And I'd love to have you back on later this year talking more about that. But just briefly, what led you into modular? What's your kind of background in music before we dive in?
So I come from the guitar world. So I grew up playing guitar in bands like pretty much since I was 10 or 11. And I've been around since, but I was never really into synthesizers. But about, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, I wasn't feeling very satisfied with how the guitar was going, like all the guitar music that I was doing. I just didn't really feel like what I was doing was what I was wanting to make. And I just kind of took a break for like almost a year off of music completely. And a buddy of mine showed me his Mono Tribe, the Korg Mono Tribe. And we jammed on that one day just randomly. And I was like, okay, I should go buy one of these little toy synths and see what it's all about. And as you can imagine, you get one and then you start collecting more. And so I'd say about 6 months after getting into synthesizers and learning all that, I saw a video for Clouds, the Mutable Clouds.
Yeah.
It was a demo by Lufttrum.
Yes. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and I was just blown away. I had no idea what it was or what modular even was. So
was that guitar in that video, if I remember right?
I remember there's like a voice sample from a audiobook, and then there's like a Rhodes sample in there. There might have been guitar.
Or maybe that was a later one, but I remember hearing the same kind of collection of non-synth sounds, if you like, around that time.
So I really had no idea what was going on in that video. I just knew, I was like, oh, I really like this. And I did some research, joined up on all the forums and started talking to people. Watched some of your demo videos, some of James Sigler's videos. And just started out with a tip-top happy ending kit, and bought Clouds, bought like a simple LFO. I didn't expect to really dive too far into it, but it turned out to be a really exactly what I was looking for in terms of like workflow and making music, I think.
So had you gone down the kind of pedal route first, looking for this kind of...
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So there's kind of several paths of shaping guitar that led to this.
Yeah. And I guess just the way that either I played guitar or just with pedals, there's only a few ways you can control everything with CV or like a expression pedal.
Yeah.
So just really getting into that with modular kind of made a ton of sense right away, just coming from that guitar pedal world.
Yeah, I can see that. I think it's a real stepping stone for people from certainly a guitar background, some keys players as well. I know a few players that pretty much play Rhodes or take a Nord out live, and they have the kind of pedal board on top of whatever keys they're playing. And that's been a bit of a kind of stepping stone to them then being interested in this stuff. So we won't get much any further really into the getting started. Like I said, that's potentially another video later this year, but
for sure,
let's dive into the kind of current system, and I'll pull up an image.
Yeah.
What led you to this setup as it is? Has it changed many times or not so much?
Yeah, my setup is very fluid, so it's constantly changing. I mean, this setup as it is right now today, I mean, it's been like this for maybe 2 weeks or so, and I'm already looking to change it up a little bit. And I have some other modules sitting in a drawer, and I've had bigger systems and smaller systems, but I think the 6U 104 HP seems to be right in my wheelhouse, where it's easy to patch and make things, make like tracks and stuff, but it's also not so much that you're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, I get that. I just want to pull up the live chat as we go. I'll pull things in live. I am watching for people that are watching this live. Logan from Login Electronics, well, first of all, said that your beard is dreamy. But goes on to say, here's a man who gets some modules and uses what he has. I think that size setup kind of speaks for that. It's not just this huge overflowing thing. I mean, I look at this, and this to me is mess. It's kind of work. It's kind of a workspace as opposed to my instrument. There's cases all over in here. But what is it about that size, I guess? There's a lot of people feel like around maybe going up to 12U, but one kind of briefcase, if you like, that's either two 6Us or just one. Is it that it's the kind of right size to carry as an instrument?
I don't know. I couldn't quantify it like that. I mean, I guess just for me, it works. Just I could split things up into, okay, this is going to be sound generation, this is going to be sound modification, CV generation, CV modification, effects, and I don't know. In 6U, it just, I've had 9U and 12U, and sometimes it just feels like you might not patch that first row to the top row as often.
Yes, I see what you mean. Again, I'll pull the image up of the setup. Logan, again, from Login, has said that 6U 104 HP is the best. Now, I know he takes that out with drum machines, effects. That's kind of his life thing as well.
Yeah.
And Richard Devine, on an interview I did with Modular Podcast a while ago, we spoke about how much time in terms of a live set he felt he could get out of a 6U against a 12U. Have you ever thought about that? That's often how I kind of look at these things of, could I do half an hour with that? Or could I do a full EP? Or, you know, what would I need to take that up to an hour set? Kind of breaking out of the niche modular world and out into the more real music world. I don't mean in terms of style. I'm not judging someone's music. I mean, actually being able to go out and play an hour. What is it, just a kind of working instrument in terms of studio stuff, or is it, do you feel you could perform just on that 6U?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I'd say right now it's more centered towards live performance, actually, this little setup.
Okay.
Especially with the ER301, I feel like I can extend sets a little bit more because I could, you know, you can switch between presets on there and really get a lot of mileage out of there. And with plonks and the 2 plonks, those have different, different presets you can switch between too. So you're not like sitting there repatching on the fly.
Yeah. One thing, again, I'll keep jumping into the live chat. Someone did ask what this was used for, and Gorilla Museums just said what's between Voltage Block and Morphogene. That's Orbrick's Rook from Shakma. How are you using that, to put that question to you?
I use it for a couple things. I mean, the obvious one is doing rhythms and percussion stuff, but I'll also use it to like trigger samples, or what I've been doing lately is the time stretching stuff on the Morphogene. I'll send it like a rhythmic clock, like, so it's kind of like not exactly a steady pulse, but it's kind of like switching the time that's coming into it pretty fast. I'll do stuff like that.
Okay, is that kind of a control hub, would you say, or almost a kind of secondary device to the 301? Do you have I guess that's a better question. Do you have a central hub? For instance, in my own drum case, I have a 6U case that's kind of stopped me wanting to buy a specific drum machine. It's my kind of working drum machine, if you like. And I feel like the Variegate 8 and the Voltage Block is the hub of that. And I can swap voices out and extra little random rhythm generators, but those two feel like my main thing, if you like.
I see.
Do you feel like you have that with any module?
I wouldn't say the Forbrooks Rook is like the hub. No, definitely not. With any hub, I'd say, definitely the 301. Everything is running through that, essentially. Just different effects that I have on there, and essentially using it as a mixer of some sorts too.
Yeah.
But because I do most of my sequencing actually through like a MIDI to CV thing.
Okay.
So
if this is so if this is the live case, then I guess the question there mentioning MIDI to CV, what else would you take? Thinking of live, Logan again has just said this specific size is perfect for taking into the woods.
Yeah. I have one of those MIDI OCD or CV OCD little boxes, and then I use the Korg Electribe for sequencing from there. So that's got 4 channels of CV and gate, and then I think it's like 10 other channels of gate or triggers too. So yeah. Okay,
so how important is the Electribe? I noticed Phil Bilsby, now Ibsidic, used to be VCO ADSR, dark, minimal. It sounds like a highly produced live DJ techno act, but it's not. It's all live modular stuff. And I know he's just recently got an Electribe again. Partly, I think, for nostalgia, because that's how he kind of started out years ago. But it's not a device you see much of. What's the pull towards the Electribe?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. Like, you wouldn't think it would be something that would go along with modular really well. But I've just been trying to find a sequencer that I can play live too. So not just sitting there inputting notes, but I can actually play the parts live as well, or record. It can record what I'm playing, and it does that really well. And yeah, it's just simple. It's a little different than playing keys or something like that. And it has the analog clocked ins and outs too. So I could run it from PAMs or whatever. And
okay, so you might clock this from the modular, but yet still put MIDI out from.
Exactly.
What's the and I know the answer because I've seen a video you did with it that sounded fantastic, but what's the actual sound of it like as a device? Do you just use it as a controller, or do you tend to jump to its own sound engine ever?
I used to make tracks with the sound of it for quite a while, but recently I'd say like Most of the time, I'm just using it as a controller nowadays. I've kind of grown accustomed to the sounds, and I feel like I can't get away from it whenever I'm making tracks with it, unless I'm running it through other effects or something like that. So I tend to just use it as a controller nowadays.
Yeah, I've certainly felt that way with certain bits of software or plugins even. It may have just jumped past me, but Jericho, sorry, there in the live chat just said, can you tell us more about the advantages of sequencing with the Electribe versus eurorack sequencers? I guess what does it do that Euro doesn't?
I think, well, the main reason for me is being able to play a part live. Like, I'm actually sitting there and triggering the notes, like as if I was playing piano or something. 3 different sequenced parts going at once, and be able to play something over that live, like improvise it.
Yeah, I think there's just physical size of eurorack is probably not ideal to do that. How I'm imagining you kind of play it, because obviously they're pads, it's not a keyboard, in terms of setting pitches per step, is potentially the similar way to how I approach the pressure points when there's 2 of them expanded, and even the added analog memory. But you're talking nearly half of that 6U case at that point, if you've got 2 analog memories and 2 pressure points and a brains to control it all. So I guess just getting it out of the rack as well is a big advantage. There's people in the live chat saying, is anyone looking for one used or new?
Yeah.
Nathan, noise jockey, telling Logan to stop projecting, to grow a beard and go get a cabin in the woods. So between your 2 releases that I'm most familiar with, Cascade Symmetry,
yes,
which is on screen, and Full Blossom of the Evening, I actually thought these were released the other way around for some reason. I thought Cascade Symmetry was older. I had no idea why, because I've never asked you or looked, but I can see on Bandcamp that was November this year. And Full Blossom of the Evening was September of the year before. Yes,
that's correct.
First of all, is there a difference in sound or approach, or?
Yeah, there really is. With the Full Blossom record, that was the first album that I released doing this kind of stuff, and I was really trying to find, what I really wanted to do, and like how to approach it, doing an album. And the result is, like, most of the tracks are just straight live takes. Like, there's no overdubs or anything. There's a few overdubs on the record, but most of it is just live takes, and it's not all modular either. Okay. Like, there's a few tracks where there's a lot of OP1, and I just tried to make a collection of tracks that I felt went really well with each other. And there's a different approaches to almost every song on there as well.
Yeah, it's a cohesive album though. It's funny you say that. I didn't expect you to say that they're different approaches. It does sound like one body of work, as I think an album kind of to me.
Oh, we got a motorcycle there.
I thought it was a chair. I thought you were like scraping a chair on a wooden floor. Excuse me. I think Full Blossom of the Evening is, and the bike's off. I think it's almost more ambient, I guess, in terms of less. Yeah. I hate to say less musical, because people think I'm judging what is and isn't music, and I never want to open that can of worms online anyway. But I think Cascade's got almost like these little melodic flurries that kind of work over sound beds a bit more. It works really well in a kind of true ambient setting, I think. I've had it on a lot without paying attention, which I don't mean this doesn't deserve your attention. It also rewards detailed, proper listening, either on monitors or headphones. But it works really well, even just kind of out of the computer speakers. I just like sound. because you can usually hear, well, now if I sit quiet, I can hear a dehumidifier a couple of rooms away. It's quiet,
Yeah.
but you know, when you're in silence, you realize it's not. And I think this just fills a space really nicely. Whereas I think Cascade Symmetry maybe draws your ear in to wanting to maybe turn it up a bit more. I feel this is kind of in the true sense more ambient, I guess.
Yeah, I can see that. I definitely say it's more, yeah. I don't know how to describe it perfectly.
I'm just kind of thinking out loud between the two. For example, a lot of I work in a college teaching music. Some days I've only got 4 or 5 students for about 3 hours, and they're all sat at computers with headphones on. I can put this on just out of my laptop speakers, and it just creates a nice kind of atmosphere in the room. Whereas Cascade, they seem to take their headphones off even at the same volume, or when they're off, they almost notice it more when it's quiet.
Yeah. Maybe there's more, I don't know. It's interesting. I'd say Full Blossom is more dronier for sure. Like it's easier to, there's not as much going on probably.
Yeah, it's kind of easier to zone out a little bit more. I really like that. Me and Matthew Shaw and Greg Gibbons that do the Modular podcast together at Super Booth last year, we basically stayed in a hotel as close as possible. We took it as work. We were there to do all the videos from Super Booth. So we'd get back from the show, edit, go and eat, either in the hotel most of the time or somewhere close. I'd sit with a laptop, we'd have a beer downstairs, then we'd edit up in the room. We were in a shared room all evening. But when we weren't editing or things were uploading, we ended up just listening to the sound of Deckard's apartment from the first Blade Runner. There's a 10-hour upload on YouTube. That was on in the background. It just has this kind of fan just whooshing in and out sound. Yeah. This would serve that purpose a lot nicer than a loop for 10 hours, of course. But
I know some people that'll put like the 10 hours of the Star Trek bridge.
Yeah, same thing. I think it's even on the same channel. And this is a much more elegant way to not just listen to, of course it warrants listening to, but to fill that space. If like me, you just always kind of want sound on. I don't like sitting in a quiet room. That sounds really sad, like I don't like being alone with my thoughts. Like I've got an issue. One thing, so going back to that release as well, again, I'll pull it up. What made you go cassette release? 2016 feels like that's almost kind of before I cottoned on to a lot of people doing cassette release. I mean, it's sold out now, so hope anyone watching this doesn't think, oh, go grab the cassette. Because unless you tell me otherwise, they can't. But what made you go cassette release?
Yeah, I grew up basically right as cassettes were dying, essentially. And so I've always had like a little bit of a soft spot for them. And yeah, I just noticed, there's a lot of ambient and electronic artists throughout the years. They still release the stuff on cassette. And up until last year, my car still had a cassette player in it. So I would always buy the cassette option if like artist had a cassette out or whatever. And
cool. I remember. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Oh, and I don't know. When it came time to put out the album, I was noticing more and more people were getting into it. Like it wasn't just a niche thing anymore. And it was cheap enough to get pressed that it wouldn't kill me if it didn't sell, and it seems more special than a CD. And yeah, it's easier to get printed than vinyl.
You've mirrored exactly what I wanted to ask with that. It seems like a nice way to do it, and also a cheap way. It seems not to cripple people, like, because vinyl's just impossibly expensive for small runs. Would you have done vinyl if it was cheaper?
That's a good question. I love vinyl personally, and one of my one of my goals is to release something on vinyl in the future. And if you're just doing it on your own, it was just too much of a hassle to try to deal with it on my own without a label or anything like that. So,
yeah, it's really. I mean, it's tough, the vinyl thing. I've played in a few kind of hip hop bands, and I tend to do the mastering work for a few hip hop guys still, and a couple of more kind of commercial dance stuff as well. I certainly don't push mastering as something I'm trying to sell. I have enough time doing all the other jobs, but they always do a vinyl release and want a really vinyl friendly master that's not too hot. There's lots of dynamics left in it. Mono, everything's mono below 200 hertz, so the needle doesn't jump. You've kind of got to be aware of those things, but they always Kickstarter it. And what I've noticed they start doing, some of them, they will Kickstarter every second album and almost merge them and do kind of like a best. Well, they don't call it best of, it's almost like a best of, half of the first and half of the second album. And that seems to be the only way that I can see completely independent artists doing it. Everything else seems to have a bit more of a label backing potentially. I used to walk around with the Home Alone Walkman.
Yes.
The little spy cassette Walkman thing. Obsessed with just recording. It sounded terrible. I wish I still had it. It just sounded horrific thinking about. So that leads us on to Cascade Symmetry. Was that the following release, or have I missed one out?
Yeah, that was the following release. There's definitely more of a focus type of process when I was recording it. For Full Blossom, I felt like it was all over the place, and I really didn't know what I was doing. And just like thinking in terms of, okay, I need to leave a lot of room in the mix, like a lot of room for mastering and all that, headroom. So this time it was really deliberate in the way I approached the whole thing.
Was it because of that? Was it a faster process, do you think?
It was. I would say it was, but it ended up taking me a while to get it done because I basically scrapped about like 2 albums worth of material before this that I was working on throughout last year. And I was doing it the same way that I was doing Full Blossom, where I would just record a track here, record a track there, and they didn't really fit in with each other.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. I just wanted to start with the blank slate. So around September of last year, I just kind of chose a sound palette that I was going to record. I just chose 3 modules basically that were going to be the only sound sources, and just kind of stuck with that. And this is what happened.
Yeah. So are those the 3 that we can see? Plonk, Rings, and the 301?
Actually, I guess the other one is not a module, but it's the Novation Peak.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll pull up the. You did send me an image of kind of current studio setup. I'll pull that up. So is there much Novation Peak on there? Are we hearing a lot of that?
I'd say a majority of it is the Rings and the Plonk. A lot of the bass sounds are from the Peak.
Okay.
And on some of the heavier tracks, like the track Empty Grids, like a lot of the distorted like pads, that's a Peak as well.
Thinking of distorted pads, that's something I'd quickly scribbled a few things down in front of me. It's so hard to get distorted pads right, I think, because it's easy to make up kind of lush. And again, I'm not trying to take away from what you've done. It's almost the easy bit's kind of the lush pad. I think then distorting it and giving it edge and character without it just sounding terrible, especially when there's maybe more complex chords, I think it's really hard. Would you say the Peak does it quite easily, or did you feel you were fighting against it? That's certainly how I feel with that kind of stuff.
I have to say the built-in distortion and overdrive effects that they put on there are pretty nice. Before that, what I would do is actually I would use clouds as a distortion module.
Okay, and just drive the input stage.
Yeah, I'd drop it to the looping delay mode and just set no delay time, and then you have the texture knob that acts as a filter. And when you put it in one of those lower quality modes, like it takes off some of like the harsh edge a little bit. So I used to do that, but the peak sounds great with the distortion, and I'm running everything through an analog heat as well from Electron. So you kind of just double up on everything, and yeah.
Yeah, you can see, again, I'll pull that image up. You can just see the heat. What's next to the analog heat, by the way?
To the left?
To the right of it.
That is my mixer.
For some reason, the way the light's falling on it, it looked like another similar sized device, but yeah, I can see it goes back a bit, and that's your mixer. How do you find the analog heat? I find myself, I know this isn't Ben Rate's pieces of equipment show, so I won't go on too much. I find myself kind of hot and cold with it. The idea of, I guess, a high-end device to add some glue and color and maybe the same little bit of color to everything if I'm multi-tracking through it over several takes, really appealing. But then I for some reason, I seem not to jump at it. I don't know why. I mean, I guess it's fairly subtle use in terms of how you use it.
Yeah, I'm using it that way, just to add a little bit of extra sparkle and sheen to like a final mix usually. And then every once in a while I'll run it through just max everything out and see what that sounds like. But I think like one of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot on there is that it's essentially a stereo filter too.
Yeah.
And that's just super useful to have at the end of the chain, coming straight out of the modular into there. Just if you just want to slightly cut off like the highs a little bit or bring up the lows.
I use the Happy Nerding MMM VCF that's stereo over. It's in the drum case at the minute, but almost like DJ mixer style. I love just being able to take all the top end out and just leave the rumble. I mean, as I said, it's in the drum case, but it could be in another case, same thing, either in low or high pass mode, just be able to nearly isolate everything and cut it off. Do you feel that the analog heat, I mean, as a technique, I think it's certainly really underlooked. Not having an analog heat, I can't speak for it. So do you think it's really kind of worth the money? Because I guess me included, but a lot of people would kind of drool over like an API 500 series rack, which obviously infinitely more expensive, but, or, 1176 compressors or all the kind of vintage rack gear. It's really nice to think, this nice stereo high-end chain. Yeah. Does this give it that kind of flavor? Or is it more?
I mean, you're not going to get the same level of quality as something like a big rack system or something like that. But it's still kind of expensive, I guess, for what it is. Or, yeah, it's expensive, but I personally think it's worth it.
That's interesting.
I feel like it's all over the place on the last two albums that I did, and I think it really helped, just mix everything together. It just sounds better to me.
Well, that's as much
it's such a subtle thing that maybe you could do with a VST or something, but
yeah, it depends on the mindset, though. I think once something's in a DAW and you're thinking about VSTs, it becomes, I'll just put this lovely little bit of glue and soft compression on, and then it's, I wonder what parallel compression sounds like, and then I'll EQ it a bit, and then I'll limit it, and then I'll get this whole chain. It's a different world.
You really go overboard on that.
Yeah, massively so. That's all the kind of validation I needed, though. If you feel like it's certainly doing that glue, and it sounds a bit cheesy, but I guess it's kind of priceless. If it does what it's supposed to do and it enhances the music in that way, then it's worth doing. Kyle, who goes to Gorilla Museum in the live chat, said, how much of your music's generative as opposed to planned?
That's a good, I would say most of it is planned. I do love the generative stuff, but I don't quite go there as often as a lot of modular people do. I guess usually I have something like a melody or something that I'll hear in my head that I want to recreate, or I'll have a melody that I'll come up with like on the guitar or something. The generative stuff seems to happen more with like the effects. So once I have like a melody out there recorded, I'll run it through like Morphogene or another granular player on the 301, and that stuff will be generative. So all the different like grains and everything that's being generated that way is generative.
Okay, so musical content is very intentional. Sonic palette is potentially influenced by play-in and patch-in and generative. The modular.
Yeah, that's more random sometimes, influenced random stuff like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I need to give that. I've mentioned a couple of times, and I need to stop saying it because I inevitably aren't going to get this done fast enough, and people are going to pester me. So I should have stayed quiet, but I haven't. I've mentioned doing an album myself. I have a track coming out on Din, Ian Body's label, which is, and the idea for that is that it's all 4 voices of modular, maybe with a sub that's just kind of splitting off the root note, inspired by the harmonic from Instruo.
Oh, yeah.
My kind of intention with that is to be really intentional with the sound, but just completely forgive and forget any musical intention. So it doesn't matter what, but I'm using the cubic chance just to give me stepped random. Letting that go into the harmonic, knowing that I will get a quantized version. And you can play the keyboard. I'll pull up an image because it kind of makes more sense when people can see it. Let me grab a quick image off Modular Grid. There's an old version for some reason that's come up, but people get the idea. So it's effectively a quantizer with 4 outputs. It's not a quad quantizer. So it's 1 input on the top left. You can attenuate it. So if you've got this mass 10 volt random voltage and you don't want 10 octaves of information, you can just scale it down. And then a transpose that you can turn on and off, which is amazing if you kind of hand tune that to an octave or a fifth or any interval you feel relevant. And to be able to turn it on and off is a really nice feature. You punch in the keyboard buttons yourself to create the scale. And then you've all these either diatonic or non-diatonic harmony. You can shift the root note round. If you want to invert the chord, you can get into drop tunings where, say, the third moves up an octave or down. Independent slew over the root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th outputs. Also generate a gate on note change. So it's a really clever device, and I kind of thought, well, if I just throw random at it, I'm going to get something musical because I'm going to set the parameters to make sure it's musical, and I'll make sure I tune 4 oscillators and so on. But then very intentional with the sound. It's completely opposite to what you've just said.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I like that contrast.
Maybe slightly... I don't know if it's more or less frustrating. Do you find that the way you've mentioned quite rewarding because you're exploring sound over something you're already happy with? Or is that still a semi-frustrating process if you feel you're not getting back, say, from the Morphogene or the 301, something that you like? Does it tend to be quite a
nice days where you really just don't feel what's, you're feeding it through the Morphogene and you're just feeding it CV and you don't really like what is coming out of it. Or maybe like you're like, okay, this sound palette that I chose is a little too, it doesn't work well when you're trying to like granularize it. So it really depends, I think. I personally, it works really well most of the time. Like I feel pretty happy with the results most of the time.
Yeah. I was tempted to use a Turing machine, thinking if I find a loop I like, I can lock it. And at least while the modular's on, it will lock. And then I thought, well, it's maybe more interesting, at least for me where my head's at, it's maybe more interesting to just say I will have no involvement. I mean, I guess I have because I'm turning notes on and off and I'm playing the scale in and chord types and things, but I've got no decision over what notes are going to come out unless I receive. So it's kind of an interesting, I'm still fooling around with it. I've got 3 or 4 tracks that I'm really happy with. But all with a real intention to splitting off pitch and rhythm based information. So The pitches from this go out into 4 oscillators. They're all going into independent VCAs. They have independent LFOs controlling the VCAs, which are all unsynced. So the LFOs are just, sometimes it's a quadrature LFO, sometimes they're all free running. They're just fading sound in and out, and pitches might change in the middle of that, or well, the LFO's got the VCA off. I find it a really nice kind of way to work. Just on that note, sorry, this is about you, Austin, not me, but I will answer this question. Jericho in the chat's just said, do I tune all the modules to a key before working on a new patch, and do I have a favorite scale or key? In terms of tuning, no, I don't tune them to anything unless it's recallable. A lot of my previous work is kind of sample library type work, where I take little snippets from a modular because it might, it needs to be recallable. A label or publisher that wants to sign it might say, oh, that's great, but you need to chop this out and this sound needs to change, or it feels like this needs to happen. And you can't recall modular enough for that. So no, in terms of this work, it's just whatever I feel like. I grab the first VCO, tune it to wherever suits that day, and most of the time it's wherever it was left. The coarse tuning doesn't move. They're not tuned to anything specific though. Obviously, if I was playing with someone or I had a keyboard hooked up, I would make sure that if I pressed a C or I had an external sequencer that said C or C sharp or whatever, it was playing the right note. When it's just modular, no, I just leave it. Kind of inspired by Detachi on that. It's just its own thing. This is just a modular part generative, part performance, I guess. What I wanted to ask as well was, before we really dive into some modules, I haven't had a chance to listen, but the new album, how do you say the name of the new album, by the way?
I say it's Saudade.
Okay, I'm not too far off.
Yeah.
So this is out fairly close to the last album.
Yeah, this came together very quickly.
Well, it's coming out in February, but we're only kind of months away from the last release.
Yeah.
What kind of inspired? Do you feel that with Cascade that you'd maybe found a way of working that was just inspiring at the time, hence this coming quite quickly, or is it entirely different?
I'd been talking to the label DAO for a while about doing a release with them, and I told them I wanted to do another self-release before I did anything with them, just to get something out there, since it had been almost more than a year since I put out the Full Blossom record. And once I put out Cascade, I contacted them and said, yeah, I'm still working on some new things, and yeah, let's make this happen. And they wanted to release it the first week of February. And yeah, I just said, all right, let's do it. And I just kind of went right back into that record mode of just get stuff done and get the recordings done. And yeah, cool. No, it's good that I love when that happens. I find some projects have been like that for me as well. A second one is quite quick. Yeah,
usually not a third.
And this time I used like a lot of tape loops and just approached it in a slightly different way. Just recording everything to a cassette tape and then different cassette loops that my friend Amulets made, and I would just play back the loops and run them through the modular and see what happens. And yeah,
cool. One thing I wanted to ask, with the previous 2 albums we've mentioned selling out on cassette, looking at the Bandcamp, I won't pull it up, people can go look themselves, but it says right there on the Bandcamp 140 copies, and then there's this kind of special edition pack of 10, so 150 tapes in total. Are you not tempted to up the number if the last 2 have sold out, or is it just an easy... I'm asking purely because I'm curious about the cassette release thing myself. Is that just an easy number for you to get from wherever you get it, or you like keeping it limited to some degree?
Right now, there's still some tapes available at the label's Bandcamp.
Okay.
So all 150 aren't sold out quite yet. And I didn't choose that number per se.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess originally I was just going to do a run of 50 of the first album. And when that sold out fairly quickly, I was like, okay, maybe I should have gotten more made. So I did 50 more, and those went out pretty quickly too. So for Cascade, I upped it to just 100 to start with, and then if it sold out, I would do another 50. And, you know, I'm very thankful that, yeah, people seem to enjoy it. And, yeah, those went pretty quickly.
Yeah,
so
cool.
I don't know. It's really just a matter of, okay, I just want to make my money back of how much I spend to make the tapes.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
One question I meant to come back to, again, Kyle, Gorilla Museum, said, what duty is Pam on? Meaning, what modes and how are you using Pamela's new workout?
That's a good question. So, really depends on the patch, I guess. A lot of the time I'll be just sending out a clock, but I really like the slop feature on the new Pam's workout.
Yeah, I love that slop. Not just for
so,
rhythms, but for LFOs and everything. It's really cool.
I guess with the way that I recorded Cascade and this new album is I played a lot of the parts by hand, so they're not really in time or anything like that. And I wanted to recreate that with, like, if I was going to be using the voltage block for sequencing. So I sending it that sloppy clock, it's almost like, you know, playing really sloppily, for lack of a better term. I just send that clock everywhere, those sloppy clocks. But I use a lot of the random outputs as well.
Yeah.
Like the random CV. I'll send that to the voltage block to control that sometimes. And yeah.
Yeah, I've not tried it controlling the voltage block. I'll certainly have to try that. But yeah, I love the slop over the LFOs.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
So there's the image of the case up. I think a couple of people have asked it, and it's the kind of, I guess, an obvious question. Why 2 plonks, 2 rings, and 2 clouds?
Well, I'll start with the clouds, because that's probably the easiest answer. I pretty much use 2 different modes pretty consistently. And I wanted to be able to use those modes at the same time. So one being the stock granular mode, and the other being the looping delay mode.
Yeah.
So I pretty much use one as a tape delay, and then one just doing like these granular sparkle stuff over everything. And having both of them there to do like live stuff or patches or whatever, it's really useful to me. So.
Do you find you almost use them like a buffer for either looping sound or freezing sound as a way to allow you to repatch or reshift what's coming into them? Or are they always kind of just live processing whatever else is going on?
No, I will freeze the buffers to repatch or can change things up if I'm playing live. I'll definitely do that.
Do you use some sort of kind of queuing system for live?
I don't. I probably should, but I don't.
Just thinking of if you were, you know, something's looping, even, you know, being modulated through one or both of the clouds, and you repatch, it's kind of left in the open as to what might come in, I guess. I guess you can't ever be 100% certain, especially if you're using the slop and the random modulation.
I just cross my fingers and hope that it sounds okay.
That's fair enough. I know early on, Phil Ebsidic used to pull off his tuning knobs for that reason, so he couldn't ever knock them. I'm sure there was other reasons as well, but just any kind of coarse tuning knob would just be pulled off.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really love about the Plonk is that it'll tell you what it's tuned to.
Okay,
so
I didn't know that.
You can at least check, okay, it's at, you know, C or whatever. But that was part of the reason why I have two plonks and 2 rings, is for playing out live. I could have 4 voices that I know pretty much what it's going to sound like. Like I know what rings is going to sound like if it's set at a certain certain way. And then with plonk, you have the presets you can save your patches and all that.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't even look at it like that. It's a really compact way, I guess, with a 301 and PAMs to just have 4 voices.
Yeah, and I like, I do a lot of the physical modeling stuff, so I'm not really doing like typical oscillator type sounds for the most part. So I'm trying to like make a lot of string sounds and a lot of like harp sounds, horn sounds, stuff like that. So having 4 voices there, I could do basically a full set with just 4 voices, making loops and stuff, and yeah.
Someone says the name of the new album, if it's in Portuguese, I guess earlier in the okay. I guess earlier in the chat they've told us how to pronounce it.
Oh, okay.
Couple of questions.
I hadn't said it out loud yet, so
I'm not going to attempt to. I can't speak local dialect that well. I'm not even going to try anything else. A couple of questions in the live chat just to pull these in. David Goodman asked, how do you record your tracks? One take or multi-track? I know you said on Full Blossom of the Evening that it was mainly all at once, but with some overdubs. What about latest releases? How are they recorded?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely a mix of both. For these last 2 releases, I've really stuck to multi-tracking because I wanted to be able to go in there after recording and really make it sound good. I personally don't think that Full Blossom sounds that great. And I wish I can go back and remix it, but I can't.
Yeah. What's the kind of recording setup? Are you pulling lots of out straight out of the modular or into a mixer that then directs out, or into a sound card? What's the recording setup?
Just straight into it goes into a mixer and then to my sound card, and just one stereo channel. So I record it 1 channel at a time. Basically.
Okay, so like constantly overdubbing yourself.
Exactly. All the stuff that's on my YouTube channel, that's all just 1 take live performance stuff.
Yeah.
And usually when I play live, it's all just playing live as opposed to, well, I guess it couldn't do multi-track live, but yeah.
Yeah, I get what you mean. 1 kind of main stereo patch. That's it, kind of thing. I found that the Praxis Snake Charmer, which takes 8 ins and gives me a DB25 connector, which then runs a snake cable out, so I can record 8 channels, has been really useful for me, especially with that ambient, more generative kind of thing I was talking about with the harmony and chants. So I can just pull all 4 voices out and then say my main stereo effects and a stereo mix. I always try and record the stereo mix. I tend to get it close to what I want, but it's always that thing of if you just wanted 1 thing up or down, there's just no way of doing it, which is tricky. Another question, maybe a personal one. I was tempted not to ask it because I literally met you last night.
I'm an open book.
Well, we literally did a test chat for people watching. If you call this meeting, met last night for the first time properly. So I thought, should I ask him this or not? It's not mega personal, but someone just asked, what's your day job? If you've got one, what is it? And is your aim to go full-time in music if you're not?
Yeah, that's a good question. Right now, I'm working in a sales engineering position.
Okay. Selling.
I come from the marketing world, actually, like graphic design.
Okay.
I've just been doing this for the last year or so. I personally, it'd be great to make enough money to do music full time.
That last bit felt kind of obvious for anyone that isn't. I was like, Charlie's going to say yes.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been lucky enough to where it's maybe doing the music stuff now is like kind of like a part-time job.
Yeah.
So, but it's very, right now it's still more about, okay, I want to make something, I want to express myself making music. So anything on top of that is just extra to me. As long as people dig what I'm doing, I'm happy.
Yeah, it's a tricky position to be in, where, you know, if say an album sold so well and that sustained you for however long, and then you think, right, I need next album out by April, otherwise I can't pay all the bills, or it's a really awkward position. There's a couple of other questions in the chat I'll pull in. Do you use clouds fully wet to get that kind of lo-fi sound, and how do you handle the latency, or do you even care? And that's from Jericho.
So I know Clouds has like a wet dry knob on there, right? But I'll usually split the signal coming in, so I'll have just a complete dry channel on my mixer, and then one that's completely wet, and I'll record it that way.
Yeah, I'm the same. I like multi-tracking out a dry stereo and a wet stereo if I can.
Yeah, and I guess with the latency, I'm not really worried about it too much. I kind of like it being actually a little laggy, a little behind.
Yeah, had someone say it was Nigel Mulaney that it's actually been mentioned in the chat for using a couple of the modules we've talked about. Talk about how he kind of likes MIDI not being totally accurate.
Yeah,
you know, not a sample accurate clock like an Expert Sleepers. He kind of likes, because it's not so imperfect. It's like playing with a bad musician. It's just not quite grid-like it should be.
It's making this, you know, you're using these electronic instruments, and maybe you're adding a little bit of that human element into it a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm really like obsessed with.
Alex Fishpool says, sorry for his ignorance, but what's the module bottom right of the case?
This guy?
I'll pull up an image again.
The Folk Tech Alter.
That's it. That's the one. I was going to ask about that for effects. So with the kind of double clouds going on, how does the Folk Tech sit?
Well, I've only had it for about a week, so
okay, fair enough.
That's one, I'm still kind of seeing how it fits in. So far, there's a chorusy type of reverb sound that sounds really lush. I've been using that a little bit. I don't have it on anything recorded yet, so it's pretty interesting so far.
Yeah, good first impression.
I believe based on the same chip as the ZDSP.
Yeah, they're all that FV1 spin chip, I think, which I think is like just a cheap and cheerful chip, but the ZDSP certainly really exploits it. I imagine the Folk Tech does as well. Someone asked, sorry, I forgot the name as the live chat's kind of bouncing around on my screen, asked which one's the output module. It doesn't look like there is one to me. Do you ever use an output module?
I do if I'm going into something that needs to have the level lowered. Like if I'm going to be running stuff into a guitar pedal.
Yeah.
Most of the time I just run it straight into my mixer and that's fine. It doesn't, the mixer can handle the hot levels, so. Okay.
Yeah, fair enough. Same for me to that question. I use them when I feel like I need them. You can come straight out of anything as long as the device can take that level. Anything.
I had some guitar pedals that couldn't handle it, so I had some output module at some point.
Yeah. Light Bath has come on and said,
good.
With the most insightful question so far, Austin, what's your favorite?
Give me the tough questions.
What's your favorite animal?
My favorite animal. It's a good question. I think I love any animals that have antlers for some reason.
Lightbath, what's your favorite animal?
Deer, moose, meese. Is that the plural of moose? Meese? I don't know.
Meese. Meese sounds more like mice.
Yeah, it does, huh? Yeah, I love moose. Yeah.
Lightbath, if you're still with us for a while, you can't put links in the YouTube live chat. It automatically cuts them out. If you want to send me a picture of your favorite animal, well, we're on the more daft questions. Logan asked boxers or briefs. Boxers.
Boxer briefs.
Yeah, boxer briefs. There you go, look. So yeah, in terms of getting back onto kind of looking at the modules, how do you find plonk against rings? I asked you about this last night briefly. When you look at them, they're clearly quite different, and the demos sound quite different. But to someone even new or that doesn't have any kind of modal plucked style sounds, they potentially look very similar as well. What's your kind of use case for each? Is one stronger at one thing than the other, or?
Definitely. I think the first main thing is the interfaces. Basically, with rings, everything's just right there on the panel. You're not diving into a menu or anything to get to most of the parameters. But yeah, they each have different types of resonators, essentially. So I think they both have modal synthesis, but then like rings has a type of string resonator, where Plonk has, you know, drum heads and beams and stuff like that. So
yeah, the percussion side of Plonk, certainly in the demos I've seen, seems stronger, I guess. I don't mean it's sonically better. You could make percussive sounds with rings, but it seems more focused on that. It kind of took me by surprise. I thought it was closer to rings and more modal, in a more traditional modal sense, I guess. And then the demos, I saw people making quite convincing kicks and snares, and
yeah, it sounds pretty. Yeah, I remember the first time I saw a demo, I was at a Control Voltage in Portland, and I was just like, "Whoa, this sounds like that sounds like a real snare." And definitely, yeah. I don't think you could quite get there with rings. It's probably better for more melodic stuff, but yeah. And then Plonk has its own exciter section built in, like Elements does.
Yeah. Again, when we chatted just to test the stream, we mentioned this last night that obviously space is an issue in a small case, but that whole left side of Elements just seems to be forgotten about. Rings came out, people jumped on rings, and even with rings, I think people forget that they have an input. They are a processor, effectively. Yeah. It's the kind of devil in Olivier's detail, I guess, in that you put the little basic pulse generator in there so it could make sound on its own, and that 95% of all I see with rings is that. Me as well, a lot of the time, to be fair, because it's just so easy to get a nice sound. But
I would say 99% of the time I'm running something else into the rings input.
Okay.
So usually the ER301, like I've made a couple custom like exciter units, I guess you'd call them.
Yeah. So what's in those exciter units? Is it much like Elements, various noises, tones, granular stuff, samples even? Exactly.
Pretty much all that. So granular noise, different envelope shapes. Yeah, even samples too. Like if you run like an inharmonic sample through it, like I've used to run like samples of the ocean, like ocean waves into it, and it sounds just awesome. So
yeah, I find sounds like that are more broadband, like noise from the ocean, work really well with the sympathetic strings.
Yeah, yes. It does.
Whereas a lot of overtones, and they're all, you know, musical harmonics as well. It's not just added harmonic content. It works really nice. One question from Hovercraft. It says, how are you using the voltage block? Any pitch sequencing or all CV? I guess it means all modulation CV.
So yeah, I use the voltage block in quite a few ways. The main way would be I'll draw, like, I'll use it to kind of draw LFOs. So I'll just put the slew on every step and essentially make my own LFO for controlling, with CV. I'll do sequencing with it too, since it has the built-in quantizing. It works pretty well as a sequencer.
Yeah.
And something that I've been doing lately is using the sliders as faders to control the ER301. So I can bring in and out different samples, basically. I don't have to go into the 301 to turn the volume up on a sample or open a VCA or something like that. I could use the voltage block sliders to do that.
Okay. Just back to a slightly distracted by light bath again. People watching this after the live stream that aren't part of this will think I'm losing it, but his favorite animals. Oh wow, like a kind of budgie dog. He said ravens in the chat. He misled me. Lightbath has said ravens. I thought, we'll just get a nice picture of a raven. And then
whoa,
okay. I'm sure he didn't, but I love the idea of a Lightbath going away and thinking, right, I'm going to show you my favorite animal, and actually photoshopping them himself. So I guess, where's the kind of modular system going? We spoke a bit about previous releases, current releases, how the system's developed. What do you feel anything's missing? Do you think you'll stay with this setup for a while? I'm probably going to be expanding again pretty soon to 9U. Okay.
I'm always looking for, I guess, the best sequencing option out there for me.
Okay.
I still haven't found what I'm looking for, really. I've tried a couple of different things.
Like, what do you want then? I guess I know that's a really odd kind of. Well, what do you want? I don't mean it in an off way. Just obviously the Electribe's giving you some hands-on control. The 301 could. Well, it doesn't really sequence. That's the 101 from orthogonal devices. But you've got voltage block. There's PAMs for the random. Is it something that ties that together better, or?
I guess something more hands-on, like how the Electribe is, but maybe within the modular system. I don't know if something like that really exists. I mean, I like the Forbrooks Rook because of that, because it's so tactile and you can record everything that goes in there. But maybe if there was something like that, where those style of buttons that spit out like almost like a keyboard in some way. I really like your last guest, Nathan Moody. His Blue Box, that the Sputnik keyboard.
Yeah, it's really tempting. That, and I haven't tried both to get a feel for what would maybe suit, but the Verbos and the Sputnik touch plates.
Yeah, and I actually I was just at Nathan's house a few weeks ago and got to play that little blue system, and it's quite something.
He's really inspiring. I know Nathan's been in the chat. He's noise jockey in the chat for anyone that's still there commenting and things. I find that idea of that being the instrument he keeps and just puts to one side really quite inspiring. That, you know, this was this release, this was this headspace, but that's my instrument. So, and it's obviously a luxury to have, and not everyone can just say, right, I will go buy a new case and rebuild a new instrument. But I really like that idea of, right, that's instrument one, that's that release, that's that headspace. How did you find it? I guess being someone else's instrument, you went, going and patching on someone else's system. I almost find myself fumbling around. I know a lot of modules very well from the video demos I do, but you're still kind of going, where are your envelopes? Have you got a VCA? Have you got, where's this? It's not a huge system, but it's still not your system. Was it quite easy, or?
Luckily, I've either played with most of the modules or have owned most of the modules that were in there. So it was kind of just like, okay, yeah, I remember I used to have a Mangrove, and Clouds is in there, so I'm used to Clouds. And It was just figuring out how to use that keyboard, basically. But yeah, it was pretty. I don't know. We were making some nice stuff on it there. Another modular guy, Joe Schumbacher, was there, and we were kind of just taking turns making patches on it. And it was quite nice.
Need to do someone's mentioned, again, Kyle, Gorilla Museum. Is there anyone you'd be interested in collaborating with? On that note, did you record what you were doing round at Nathan's with Joe?
No.
Fail on Nathan's part. He should have hit record before you even stepped in the house.
Definitely. There's some people I would love to collaborate with, and there's definitely some collaborations in the works. I can say that.
Okay. How are you? I won't probe you for those because you'll tell us what you want to tell us, but are they collaborations in person? Are they sending files back and forth? Is it a shared DAW project that you record into and share and manipulate? How are you? What's the kind of mechanics of the collaboration?
It depends on the person, I guess. There's some people that I'd rather collaborate in person with.
Okay.
There's one project I'm working on now where they're a guitar player primarily.
Okay.
So they've sent me some guitar stems, and it's all just about me processing through the system, the eurorack system.
So is that live?
Obviously, it depends on if I can get in touch, like in person, with that person as well. Yeah,
logistically, whether it's even possible. So are you, with a guitarist, is that all entirely live? Because I've only very briefly played around with either being the performer myself or having someone else perform. And obviously there's a kind of two-way thing happens of you play something, you hear it being looped or mangled or the sound's different. And I think a good musician is going to adjust what they're playing to suit what's happening and let it breathe and become reactive. Maybe a worse musician will just keep playing what they want and not give it that two-way thing. So is that always live, or is it recorded? And again, if it isn't live, it could obviously be very intentional as well in terms of working with recordings. How are you going about that?
I'm not sure if he recorded the tracks live or not.
So it's not recorded together, I guess, is what I mean. Because every time I've been the kind of modular processor, the person that sent me something or recorded it in my room, and then we process it.
I see.
And it says, I'd play that differently if I knew you were going to do that. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that because you're playing a busier line and there's no room. And like, no, but that's cool. I should play a simpler part. Or it's kind of almost easier if we both together, I guess. But
I guess in terms of this collaboration, it's more about me taking his guitar sounds and then I'm going to just turn those guitar sounds into something else completely.
Okay.
I may not even add any other sounds myself. I might just run them through like granular processors or filters and stuff like that, or rearrange stuff and see how it comes out that way. So, yeah.
Thinking of touch controllers, Logan said, highly recommends the Future Retro touch plate, very responsive. A few people mentioning touch controllers not very good with non-conductive fingers or having to lick your fingers.
Is the Future Retro thing, is that in the system?
I think that's out external gear. Let's have a look. And I remember this. It might be one that becomes familiar when you see it. External piece of kit.
Oh. I don't think I've ever seen that.
Okay. Was it a Kickstarter even? Maybe not. But the Future Retro FR 512. It looks like there's some outs on top. Volt per octave gate. Velocity, clock. I can't quite make out the rest on that image, but maybe monophonic.
one of the other big things is the need for multiple channels as well.
Yeah, that just having 1 volt per octave out wouldn't kind of cut it for me. But that's interesting that that's really responsive. I wonder if Logan means more responsive than other options, if that's been an issue for people. I feel like I'm being trolled by Lightbath and I'm egging him on in the back.
What is he saying now? I can't see the chat anymore.
Okay. I said he'd failed.
Oh,
I said he'd failed because he said ravens were his favourite animals, yet he didn't send a picture of a raven. So there we go. I think that wins the internet for modular and cats as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Logan said what I was thinking when you said you, Joe, and Nathan together. He'd have mic'd up the whole room and videoed it, and that'd be really cool to just kind of have an afternoon round at Nathan's place and just record it.
I should mention that Nathan mastered the Cascade Symmetry album.
Yes, I did know that. He's putting out some really nicely polished releases for people at the minute.
Yeah, I was really happy with the job that he did, and yeah, everyone should go hire him to master their release.
Yeah, I'd second that. Just listen to the work he's doing; it speaks for itself, without us telling you to as well. So, for those that are in the live chat, we'll start to look to kind of wrap this up. I think in terms of any questions, fire away now. One's just come through. What does beny mean?
I get asked that a lot. Essentially, when I started my YouTube channel, I just needed a name. I couldn't think of anything, so it's an homage to a French-Canadian photographer that I really enjoy. And I just picked it, didn't think that it would stick, and here we are. So.
Yeah. once it's there and it's stuck, there's no going back.
Exactly.
Going for the whole rebrand kind of thing, I think, is a big no-no. So, what's the kind of plans for the rest of the year? Do you think there's another album in this year, or not sure? Having just done 2 fairly recently.
Yeah, there's the next thing besides that, the tape that I'm releasing with Tao, is I'm working on a split with another one of my favorite artists, Paperbark. I'm not sure if anybody in here knows Paperbark, but they should check him out. Yeah, so we're working on that now, and that should be out in a few months. And the first thing that comes up, because it's local to me, is Paperbark bespoke wedding stationery. I evidently don't know Paperbark. Okay.
Do you know any links off the top of your head? I can pull that up for us to check out.
I know he's on Black Box Tapes. Maybe you could search Paperbark Black Box Tapes. This stuff is, some of my favorite stuff that's being created with modular. But he also uses the See It Lombard gear as well.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky enough to play a few shows with him over the last few years, and yeah, we really wanted to do something together.
That's cool. I've found the.
Yeah, there we go.
So if people are searching for Paperbark and they find this Forgotten Narratives release, you're in the right space. Cool, I'll check that out. Okay. There's a couple of questions. Again, get these in quickly before we kind of start to wrap up. DB Powerline has asked, how do you start an ambient piece? Melody first or texture first, etc.?
It's a little bit of both. So sometimes I'll try to go for a certain sound and then come up with the melodies after that. A lot of the time it's just making a melody and then changing the sound after the fact. But yeah, usually it's just coming up with one part and then building up around that. That's what I do. Since I came from the guitar world, I used to work with like the guitar pedal loopers a lot. So I kind of think in the same way when I'm working on the modular. building up loops and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people approach kind of DAW production like that. Just it loops build until it peaks, and then it's a case of pulling things apart in the arrangement. Jericho asked, how important are rest and silenced parts in your melodies or music, and how do you approach that during performance?
They're very, very important. Yeah, I was just reading something about that. But how do I approach
silence itself as a whole is a real tricky one live.
Obviously, yeah, it can be very powerful if you utilize it right.
Yeah.
So, for example, like if I'm building up to like a really loud crescendo, I might, leave a lot of space right before I hit that, like the heaviest part of the track or something.
Yeah.
Or I might just have like these melodies that are very sparse. So I'll play a note and it might be a few seconds before another note hits, or just let things ring out a little bit, leave a lot of room there in the mix and everything.
I think in terms of dynamics as well, if say the effects are quite pushed back, there's a lot of depth in the mix. That top line melody, it's not necessarily silenced, but the bed stays where it is and stuff pokes out.
Yeah.
It works really well. I know in terms of club stuff, which is kind of how very different to what you're doing here, obviously, but as DivKid kind of started as more commercial dance music stuff with a label, and luckily we had Carl Cox playing some of our tunes, kind of house tracks, and did fairly well. Me and a friend Andy that started DivKid just doing that, very different to what it is now. And that idea of the silence kind of before the drop, I mean, it doesn't have to be a dubstep drop. I don't mean like that, but
exactly.
It also meant that not only do your ears reset very quickly, if you're playing on a loud club system, all the compressors reset as well. So that transient that smacks through a PA system, because this huge wall of sound will build, and all dance music now goes to silence, and there's a stupid pitch down voice, which we won't get into.
Oh yeah.
But the actual gap lets all the compression, and if there's any compression and limiting on a club system or a bigger PA system, reset. So that first kind of bang as it comes back in is such a powerful thing, kind of regardless of style, but very powerful in that environment.
Yeah, I learned a lot of that from like listening to post rock back in the day, like Godspeed and stuff like that.
Yeah, cool. I think that's it for questions. Couple of bits. I'll pull the chat in, actually, let people see what's going on. I should say, Logan at Login, thanks for boxes and briefs and all.
Yeah, there we go.
Questions. Well, and everyone else that I know in there, there's quite a lot of my Patreon supporters in the chat. People like Lightbath that I don't know that well personally, but I've enjoyed brief conversation with, and certainly admire his work as well. Lightbath will be on a future show. Logan's been on a couple of modular podcast shows before. I just wanted to say thanks to the community. These live chats for me are selfishly a nice way to just spend a Sunday evening talking to someone that I either know well or don't, but admire their work. And the live chat side of it's really growing quite well. So thanks to everyone that's in there. I'm not going to go through and name names. There is a question there I did see. There we go, from AMK Music. If you could only have 5 modules, what would they be?
5 clouds. No, I'm just kidding. That's a good question. I would definitely have clouds would have to be in there. I know it's kind of the cliche thing in modular now to have a clouds in like a small system, but I love it.
Fair enough.
Voltage block, I think, is another one. I don't think I could live without that.
Ben Davis jumped in the chat as well, that works at Moleco and designed the voltage block and Varigate. Cool guy. Lots of cool modules coming as well. Go pester Ben and tell him I sent you. Other modules, so clouds, voltage block.
Probably Pam's new workout would be in there.
301.
301. Oh yeah. How could I forget? 301 and probably the Morphogene, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Come back to the 301 actually before we wrap up, because a few people messaged, not so much in the live chat, but did message me or comment when I said we were doing this. Make sure you dig in about the 301. A couple of other questions. Dan, I'm not going to try and say your last name. You've corrected me on this before. Zels, S-Z-E-L-E-S. You've told me how to do it, and I'm going to fool myself. Do you find the lo-fi junket to be a bit of a limited factor after the novelty wears off? He's noticed it's gone from your rig.
Yeah. I think maybe sometimes, yeah, it feels like a one-trick pony. I will say now that I don't have it, I miss it quite a bit. Like, yeah, it does what it does really well. And there's other ways to get stuff to sound lo-fi, I think, too, besides just using the lo-fi junkie.
I found the compression on it was really nice on drums. If you keep it all the way to comp rather than lo-fi, so you don't get the tonal change with it. It
was doing some nice stuff with the compression.
Yeah, it smacks really hard. And with a dry wet blend, you can do all the kind of New York compression, parallel compression on drums. And I think that's where it goes beyond the one trick pony thing a bit. But 8 HP just for a compressor, I guess there's other options out there if people want to do that. Couple of other ones. What would be your superpower?
Shit. Guess flying would be pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay. What made you Nefako? What made you downsize your big rack?
At some point, the rack that I had before this, I started to feel a little overwhelmed by it. I wasn't really getting anything done with it. I always felt like there's too many things to pull from, and I didn't know. I felt directionless, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, that size works well for some people, for sure. I guess
in complete contradiction to what is actually there, I'd agree entirely. This is... the way this is laid out at the minute, just to kind of touch on the big thing, little case thing, I thought if I put all my oscillators in one 9U case, or at least analog oscillators or whatever, and then all the filters underneath, when I'm patching, it's going to force me to think, I've got my waveforms mixed from my oscillators, which filter do I want to use? And try and use that as a way to help me slim down the system. What ended up happening was it became incredibly frustrating, and I'd just pull modules out, and it's just a huge, big mess. And I found it fairly overwhelming. The majority of it is set out for ease of video demo at the minute. So there's always kind of a few VCAs and envelopes and modulation sources and sound sources around. So if something comes in for me, this is 20 HP, this is going to be the next video I need to film. There's a slot that's fairly logical. I can just pull it out and put it in. And as long as I can kind of get that and a Mordax data next to it, I can do the work. I think a smaller focused instrument is more interesting to me as well at the minute. A couple of questions again. What are your top 3 favorite artists? That's from Shitpins. I'll rephrase it though. I guess, who do you want to kind of shout out, artists and stuff? You mentioned Paperback, other people that we should be aware of and be checking out.
Oh, there's really too many. I guess the first would be IOFlow. My buddy Josh IOFlow. He just put out a new record, or a new tape called Spring that's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Modular, piano, and sound field recordings. I highly recommend everyone go check that out. It's one of my favorite releases from last year.
Cool. What I'll ask you to do, if you don't mind, is, because it always becomes that thing of, God, there's so many to name, and then you realise, I should have said this. I've forgotten either a friend or something you really like. If you can send me a list of links for people to
definitely.
I'll put those in the video description for people.
Yeah. And then everybody, you just go see who I'm following on Instagram, and
yeah, that's
that should
clearly
be a
where
good idea.
Right. Light Bath's mentioned as well.
Yeah, Light Bath.
You, him, Emily Sprague are playing in LA next Sunday.
That's correct. Really, it's gonna be a good show. I'll be at NAMM next week too. If anybody wants to come say hi.
Ah, cool. Have you been to NAMM before?
No, first timer. Looking forward to it.
Are you ready for the? Is it NAMM Frax that people call it? The mega flu that everyone seems to.
Oh yeah. Oh, I saw a funny pun the other day. Yeah, I'm ready. Gonna drink a lot of vitamin water.
Yeah. Good luck with that. Everyone seemed when I always leave everyone alone for a week after NAMM, knowing that people that I chat to regularly or work with are there, and they all still come back and like, oh man, I'm so ill still. Nice carpets though. Nick Batt at Sonic State said he gives Nick's wicked. Really helpful for me for lots of different reasons. And I remember seeing at Super Booth, and I think it was maybe Ed that does some footage with them, said something about the shoes he was wearing, kind of taking the piss. He was like, look, you will find yourself some trade show shoes if you do the amount that we do, and you'll be the happiest person alive. And he also said that the carpet at NAMM is very good. He's got nice, soft, spongy carpet. The first Super Booth was at the old Funk House, which had, well, we were told, I don't know how true this is, I haven't tried to look it up, but the marbled floor in the Funk House was marble that Hitler ordered when he thought they were going to win the war and build Germania across Europe. Obviously, that didn't go too well for Hitler at the time. So they had all this marble, and the Soviets took it and put it in the Funk House. And it is just brutal, just standing on marble for 3 days solid.
Oh, it sounds terrible.
Yeah, amazing place. I know Loop, the Ableton event's still in the Funk House. For anyone that can go and check that venue out, acoustically amazing. Walking into two studios that look the same, and one sounds hugely reflective and ambient like a concert hall, but it's not that big. And another that looks exactly the same is like being in a vocal booth, just absolutely stone dead. Really kind of marvel of engineering and that Soviet era as well. Really cool. Last few questions. We are going to wrap this up. Again, lots of people just saying, you know, thanks and look forward to checking things out, going to the gig. Any particular artists that make patch videos that you would recommend? That's from Holland Monday.
I go with Light Bath on that one. He just started doing some tutorial patching videos recently, actually.
Yeah.
I think he just put his first one up, and he's doing a Patreon thing now. Yeah, I think this is worth checking out. And Mylar Melodies is the other guy to check out.
Yeah, Alex. There's quite a lot of people. I mean, if you want to leave these as comments, anyone that doesn't get a question answered, I'll certainly watch all the comments on my channel afterwards. Are you using the Broken Tape Echo module on the 301? Let's just briefly get into that, and then we'll wrap it.
Is it the trash tape?
I don't know. I don't know the 301 to comment.
That's the one I had used. That one by Scott Campbell made it. He's another guy I'll probably add to that list of modular people that I enjoy. Yeah, he's done some cool custom modules on the 301.
Yeah. So with a 301, what's the learning curve like? It looks hugely intimidating. Everyone I know that's got it says it's not bad.
It's pretty easy. I wouldn't say it's easier than learning an Electron machine, I'd say.
Okay.
But definitely takes a little bit of diving in there and just realizing what it can do and like how the terminology chains and units and stuff like that, how they all interact with each other.
That's a nice closing comment from the live chat. Richard Horseman says his wife loves your tunes which really helped when he decided he needed to spend $300, I guess, on the low-fi drinking. He can tell his wife that he'll sound more like you.
Okay. I'm happy to help.
So yeah, we'll leave it there. Just people, inevitably, the live chat's going to keep going. These shows end up being like 2.5 hours long, which is amazing, and it's great to have all this community live chat thing going on. But I think that heavily diminishes the kind of watchability afterwards once we hit like a 2-hour mark. I'll definitely have Austin on shows in the future, whether that's the kind of monthly patron hangouts that I do that's private and exclusive for them, or the getting started shows. I think getting your take on maybe setting up a system from start would be really interesting for people as well. And I think it's evident from the live chat, people like Logan, Kyle's been asking lots of questions, and Lightbath, we should do a kind of group rig rundown chat. Well, not a rig rundown, some sort of group chat, pulling everyone in at some point. And that'd be good fun. So yeah, huge thanks for coming on. As I said earlier, we met last night, and as I thought, it'd be just a nice chat to have. And yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for listening that listens to my music. I'm really happy to be a part of this little community, and it's been a really rewarding experience, I think.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's why I guess so much of my time is put into it. Regardless of the video demo stuff, I do really try and stay on top of it. It's an amazing kind of, still a really nice community to be in. Go support me on Patreon. I'll plug that. People keep saying I need to plug it more, but I always kind of feel weird. There are bonuses, which you can see when you land on there if people want to. Support Austin, buying his music. All the links will be in the description. And thanks for joining us. Cheers, everyone.
Bye.